Welcome back to another edition of the Edge Podcast. Managing editor Brenden Slaughter, joined as always by my recruiting analyst Jared Halus, here for another edition of the Edge Podcast, the first one of 2021. And Jared and I got some great news to talk about. We got lots of Oregon State updates to kind of get through, including some big time transfer news. But just getting started, Jared, how are you doing? How's life treating you, my friend?
It's going well. Happy to be in the new year. Trying to get things going on a good note. Good to be back podcasting after a couple of weeks off for the holidays and everything.
Certainly, and it's kind of crazy to think we're a couple weeks removed now from the end of the season. We've had a lot of time to reflect. You and I have done various pieces on the recruiting class, the incoming transfers, certain other aspects of the team, analytics as far as scores go. So we are kind of really firmly into the off season now, and that's where things get really exciting as far as Oregon State being able to really improve their squad, and that's what you and I specifically talked about in our signing day podcast, which was the last one that we did, just kind of recapping that, we've seen these last 2 years with Jonathan Smith, how close the Beavers have been, whether it be the 5-7 campaign in 19 or this year losing several games just by the one score and, beating Oregon, beating Cal, that they're really just a few difference makers away from being at that top level. And we've seen them, attack with a very small, but, mighty is what we like to say, recruiting class in the early signing period. And now we've seen some transfer portal action as well. So before we kind of get into the nitty gritty and as far as like the most latest information, Jared, just has everything kind of gone to course as you would have projected it, say, the end of the season, as far as the steps Oregon State and the recruiting staff have taken these last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I would say for the most part, yeah. I think maybe there was a feeling in the back of my head that they may have tried to make some effort to make a late addition for the early signing period. Obviously, that wasn't what was in the cards. I mean, obviously they swung on Imbo and Rollins, who both ended up at great schools. So I mean, I maybe expected another addition for that part of the class, and obviously they're adding more players to the roster via the transfer portal, which we'll get into and everything. But otherwise I would say, yeah, I think everything's pretty much gone to par. I think they're seeing their plan through, which is obviously the most important thing. We'll just have to see how it plays out.
Certainly. And I would say I'd agree with you. I think that if nothing's really surprised me, I'd say so far. I mean, perhaps the addition that we'll get into here in a minute maybe caught me a little bit off guard, but we knew that the Beavers were going to be aggressive with the portal. We knew they were going to be, aggressive in trying to find those players because Jonathan Smith and said as much in his signing day press conference that there were still needs that they needed to add. And Jared, we've been talking about this on the damn board quite a bit. Talk about how much more flexibility they have not having that scholarship limit this year. That's been a really, really great, conversation piece between all of our subscribers. Just kind of like, it's a weird year. 2021, basically what my understanding is for as much as your athletic department wants to pay, you can have as many scholarships as you want.
Yeah, it's honestly a little bit weird because, yes, we've been asked this question a lot about how many are they going to allow in 2022, 2023, moving forward. Is this going to permanently change the numbers? Are we going to see it, go straight back to 85? Is it going to slowly go down to 85? And that's an answer that nobody has right now. So it's all like, it is a good thing for this year, especially for guys like grad transfers and stuff. And I mean, really everyone got an extra year of eligibility. So for guys wanting to get a different shot somewhere else, it's perfect because, you can go and, make the most out of a year somewhere else. So I think we're seeing some benefits for sure. But the most interesting part to me is just seeing, what they decide to do as far as how it's going to play out in the future. And if we're going to have to see some major roster attrition, moving forward, it's honestly kind of a scary. I don't think it's going to happen. I think they'll keep in mind that, the teams have lots of, people coming in that wouldn't have otherwise counted towards their scholarship numbers. So it is super interesting. And I think you said it best in our mailbag. It'll probably be some kind of gradual decrease. I would hope that's what happens.
Right.
That way, you don't have to chop everyone off at once.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a weird situation, right? Because from my first, glance at this, it goes, oh, the super rich schools are immediately favored here. The smaller budget athletic departments could be put in a bit of a bind, given that scholarships in this case, there's no limit. But in theory, now there's the ability for a school in an athletic department that has the, say maybe one school in the Pac 12 can offer, say, hey, this year we got the, whatever funds, we can offer 15 scholarships. And maybe another school in the Pac 12 goes, yeah, we budget for 85, we can only do 90. And that's the difference of 10 scholarship guys. You know, I just hope there's some sort of eventual oversight because it plays into the portal being wide open this year, and it just adds another element to this wild, wild west mentality where guess we'll just have to see where all the chips fall when all this is done and what the NCAA finally emerges. I mean, lack of leadership has been, an understatement. So it'll be interesting to see, when, if anything, is really given in that regard as far as a clear answer there.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, it's just a guessing game at this point. Again, hopefully they'll make it some kind of gradual something where, there's no chopping block and you don't have to, ruin the potential careers and plans of a lot of people. So it's going to be interesting for sure. Just another thing that 2020 made us have to deal with moving forward. So we'll see how it all unfolds.
Certainly, and that's a great segue into how the Beavers really. We're here on first week of January, but I'll go ahead and give them the credit and say it was starting the new year off with a bang. Beavers land South Carolina running back Deshaun Fenwick. Um, you and I have written about this in great length and detail the last 24 hours. In more ways than one, this is a guy that I preach about all the time as far as the mold of a player. I go anytime Oregon State University in Corvallis, Oregon can draw SEC level talent, it's a no-brainer. It's where the conversation really stops and finishes. It's an impressive ad in many ways.
Yeah, and I think it's as especially a team like Oregon State starts to get these super talented guys in via the portal, it's making other people kind of loosen up a bit to it. I think at first everybody was like, "This is going to be crazy. It's going to be a free agency." But it truly is beneficial, I think, for all parties. There's going to be instances where a guy leaves that you're like, dang it, I wish he would have stayed. But at the same time, you could turn around and add somebody else, as easily as the other one left. I mean, it's going to be super beneficial for everyone. And I think we're starting to see that already, especially, like I said, for a team like Oregon State that can really make some waves and has already through the transfer portal. It's super exciting. And yeah, I mean, Deshaun is a super interesting player. I was kind of surprised to see well, I don't want to say that because I don't think he was being utilized enough at South Carolina. I think that's probably what led to the decision. Honestly, I think he could be an impact guy at Oregon State for sure.
It's interesting because we've already seen a little bit, and I saw this with some of the conversations on the damn board just to kind of get back to what our subscribers have been saying, and it's interesting because there were some that were like, yes, big time need. We even answered this in some mailbags a week or two ago that our subscribers and you and I maybe felt as well that the running back room needed more. But then I've also seen what does this mean for BJ Baylor, who kind of really maybe earned, the right to be given at least the first, crack at it, given that he had been the understudy to Jamar and kind of really earned his way as that backup role. So by bringing Fenwick into the mix, I think it just, iron sharpens iron, right? And when you look at a guy like him, 6'1", 220 pounds, just a big human being as far as a running back and being able to watch his tape. He's got a few, Jefferson didn't quite weigh that much. He's got a little bit more weight than Jefferson does, but their running style, it's very similar. That's something I wrote about in my analysis. I saw kind of they're very patient. They hit the block the same way. They follow their offensive linemen. There's a real grace to his running style. And, Michael Petrie, his reaction on Twitter, sending a real, exciting, gif of the moment, maybe should tell you everything you need to hear that, this was a guy that, you wrote about his stats and what he was able to, and not to mention his offer sheet. There's a
Yeah,
lot of reason to be excited about him.
yeah, he definitely had some great offers out of high school. And I mean, the state of Florida is a really good state, especially where he's from. There's a bunch of
Braden.
schools that recruit that area. So I mean, Florida is like one of the many schools in the Southeast that really is a good school for recruiting. So
Yeah, I mean,
great to pick
it
one up from there.
regularly competes as one of the top states in the country. I mean, it's up there with
Exactly.
California and Texas as
Right.
the
Right.
states.
Right.
Certainly.
Yeah. I mean that's more so what I was getting at. It's one of the it's like a California,
Exactly.
except for it's on the other side of the country. So doesn't matter who it is. Anytime you can get a player out of there, it's a beautiful thing.
Certainly. And I guess for you, Jared, when you kind of mentioned this is kind of the last thing I want to do before we can kind of, move on and talk about Oregon State's other, transfer that we haven't talked about since we podcasted last. You said you thought he was maybe misused at South Carolina.
Yeah.
Expand on that thought a little bit, and how do you see him kind of fitting into the mix, especially when, again, I want to bring up the concerns of some of our damn board members saying, how much does this hurt the growth of Isaiah Newell and Tayron Madison, who maybe some thought would take the leap, or is this maybe a thought saying we're not sure, what they're going to be? They haven't taken snaps. I mean, it's really, and Demir Collins coming into the mix as well. So it murks things up a little bit in a good way, kind of. I think it can, but it just creates a lot of murkiness in the situation. You almost think that maybe one guy might not be there.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely. I remember texting you when, we were kind of both just talking over the holiday just about news, and we're like, hopefully these guys will spare us and make their decisions after the holidays or
And they
something
did.
like that. They did, and I just remember us talking about, does this open up another spot? What's going to happen? And just to get back to the original question with South Carolina and everything, I just feel like if you have a guy that rushes for 100 yards, the first player in South Carolina history to rush for 100 yards in their debut since 1999.
Ooh.
Why does he not play more football for your team? Why does he only see one more game that season? Next year, he only plays 5. This year, granted, he did play 8 games, which could be all they played. I'm not too sure what South
Yeah.
Carolina looked like with their cancellations and everything. But why is a player like that not seeing more reps? Why? I mean, it's clear that he can be an impact player. As a true freshman, the guy's running for 100 yards. Granted, I think it was against like Akron or something, but who cares?
Yeah.
It's his first ever collegiate game, and he goes for 100. It's
Yeah.
significant. So I just feel like he was not being utilized as much maybe as he should have been. And he's not going to walk into Oregon State and win the job right away. Like we're talking about, there's talent on that roster for sure. But, I'm sure part of the coach's pitch to him was like, hey, you can compete for the job for certain. And at the very least, maybe we'll utilize you more than you were being at South Carolina.
If you had to guess, and I'm just genuinely curious because it's not common. Who we'll get into this as well with the next transfer. Do you think it's position coaches, or do you think it's more Blue Adams, who kind of has his arm in the Southeast, that kind of has the angle here? Because we've seen it a little bit, even before, he was a one-time committed, didn't end up working out with Jalen Martin, but we've kind of seen a bit of a, even with this, it kind of leads me to believe that maybe not a trend, not like a Texas trend per se, like we've seen with Jimmy Ballison and Zariah Beeson, but enough to say, hey, the Beavers aren't scared of going into SEC territory by any stretch.
Yeah, I mean, I really think with the portal, it's a little different. You talk about the
Right.
Texas pipelines that we've seen created and everything. That's a lot of credit due to Coach Henson for that one. He's really been diving in there. You talk about Coach Blue getting into the Southeast a little bit. That's another big one. I think with the portal, it really, truly, I don't think it matters. I think when you enter the portal, you're looking for the best opportunity. And for a lot of these guys, that Oregon State could be that. And that's what we've said from the beginning. If you want to, not have a million eyeballs on you, not feel the pressure of, trying to start over probably a roster full of 4 and 5 stars at an SEC school, come on, we'll welcome you with open arms, and you will at least be given the chance to compete. It's so I really don't think it matters. And I think for now, while Oregon State is still, of course, nearing the back end, but still trying to get to a point that they're not quite at yet. I think it's just a perfect mix. These guys are able to join a program that's going to win some ball games, and have the opportunity to contribute to that.
Certainly great points all around. And that's a perfect segue to, the second not grad transfer, excuse me, just regular portal transfer the Beavers were able to secure. And that's Georgia wide receiver, Makia Tongue. Jared, tell us a little bit about him. It's been has it been a couple weeks now? It was right after Christmas, but before New Year's, correct?
Yeah, I think it was somewhere around that time.
Yeah, I'm like, it's been a lot of crazy days all in a row. But bottom line, another receiver joining the fold and a guy that you and I are both really excited about. Give me the lowdown on him. Remind, Edgers and everyone else listening why he's a guy who, really could come in right away and make a difference.
Yeah, he's first of all, he's an athlete. He's from Louisiana, Baton Rouge, and he's that's another really good recruiting state. So one reason to be excited about him already. Anybody I think that's on scholarship playing at UGA is a pretty dang good football player.
Yep.
So you could argue about a couple of guys here and there, but
look at Jared trying to nitpick a top 10 program. Look at this, folks.
No, but Tongue is definitely an intriguing prospect. Another guy that may have felt, at least, I'm not incredibly familiar with what was going on there, but just judging by the looks of things on paper, he probably got the vibe that he was not being utilized
right
at UGA. He joined in the class of 2019, so he comes in with the George Pickens and stuff like that, and we all know how that story goes. So he may have just seen a time to explore a better opportunity where he might be able to get his name out there. Because it's like this with all the quote unquote. I wouldn't necessarily label UJ as a blue blood yet. I think they're getting to that point, but at this point, I wouldn't say they are. And you see this happen a lot. There's guys that come in, they're 4-star guys that get buried underneath a 5-star that would arguably, if possible, be a one and done to the NFL the next year.
Accurate.
So it's not due to a shortage of talent on their end. It's just that the roster is so loaded. And so if you can take a chance and, go try to play elsewhere, why not? And I think, similar to Fenwick, I think that's what we saw with Tom.
Again, I wrote about it and great points, Jared, just first of all. And, it just brings me back to my kind of resounding point that, all Beaver fans should be excited about. You got 2 transfers, high impact offensive skill position players from the best conference in college football. Again, not high school guys, but guys that have had college experience that, again, you go from SEC to Pac-12, you're arguably taking a step down in competition. And, it's not out of the stretch of the imagination, when we say Fenwick could come in and he could take the starting job. He has that potential, as does, Tongue, to come in and be a starter because of his size, frame, and build, and this instant eligibility. My thing is, if I'm a Beer fan here, I'm looking at this. I'm really excited that you're going after, at least within reason. It's not like you're pulling, their best recruits, but still, you're going into a new area, pulling in, guys that want to play and want to be in better situations. And Oregon State has typically shown throughout the Jonathan Smith tenure that they can be a home to that. And on top of it, they'll give you a pretty good chance to get in the NFL too.
No doubt. And I like I said earlier, I think the people are kind of starting to warm up to that idea. It's maybe something that, again, was viewed as this is going to be college football free agency at first. But as people see the benefits to it, that it provides not only to the program, but most importantly, in my opinion, and I think in pretty much everybody's opinion, hopefully, it provides great benefit to the kid. It gives them a second chance. There is, obviously you want to see a level of commitment from these guys, but depending on the circumstances, it makes a lot of sense for them to make these moves. So, I think people are warming up to it. Oregon State fans, particularly, I think are kind of questioning a couple of things, just like, okay, we got a receiver, maybe didn't need that. We got a running back, maybe didn't need that. What we need is an offensive lineman and some defensive linemen as well. We need guys in the trenches. I think that's really what's got people's head spinning still at this point. Like, okay, great. Yeah, I'm excited about this, but if we can use those spots for a position of actual need, we've got talent at running back, we've got talent at receiver. And not to say that there's not talent on the trenches either, but there's not depth. And that's what I think needs to be established at Oregon State via the portal. And I think it will, but it's just going to take some time.
Done. I mean, that's,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
again, I think, we've done our best as far as, our information at Beaver's Edge, being able to say, hey, here's what we think is the number of scholarships they're at right now, even though there is no limit. Because again, I choose to believe and choose to think Oregon State, being a relatively smaller athletic department, is still not going to be able just to go gung ho and be like, hey, everybody come to Corvallis. I don't
yeah.
think that's super realistic. So I still think they have to pick and choose their spots. So
Certainly,
I
absolutely.
totally understand from the edger's perspective, where they're like, hey, we need linemen. Most notably, again, I've said it for a while. Defensive line for me it stops there. You could, I think, with Mahalchik on the O line, the guys they've got in the system, you could potentially be fine at offensive line. I think for at least the next couple years, in my opinion. Defensive line, they need bodies. They need
Yeah.
bodies. They need guys that can take up space. As we saw this year, that was basically the last thing on defense that hadn't really been at the level they needed to be.
Mhm.
We saw great linebacker play. We saw improved, not perfect, but improved defensive back play. And the line, just not enough production. And, that's the thing is, I think the portal's still getting added. I think the Beavers need to, do their due diligence. But I think it would be foolish to think they wouldn't try to do everything that they can to add a defensive lineman. And to your point, maybe even an offensive lineman.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think those positions, offensive line and defensive line, are one of the ones where it's harder, to come right in and make an instant impact. I mean, especially when you've got guys that are having to gain 20, 30, however many pounds to be Power Five ready and have that frame. And not to say you have to be that size, but it certainly helps.
Yep.
And I mean, so it's not like bringing in a guy like Tung who just has a natural skill set and athletic ability where he can make plays. These guys really have to be coached up and trained. So I think the portal will help with that because you're adding guys from schools they've gone through the college coaching already. They know what it's going to be like. So it's all good. And like you said, they're not done yet. There's no need to hit the panic button yet. If it were the summertime and we were still having this conversation, I would say, all right, what's going on? But for now, they're still making some great additions, and time will tell what happens next.
Exactly. And that's where you said, I mean, arguably, again, right now expect, we think he can, but right now expecting Omari and Moy to come in and just be, the, cure all to all the, defensive line woes is
Right.
putting way too much expectations on a freshman, right? And that's where
Yeah.
you said he probably, and again, we won't know until he gets in the grind of things and, we get reports from spring practice and, fingers crossed, maybe get to attend fall camp in person this year. We'll see what happens, keep my fingers crossed. August is still a ways away. But, as far as, I don't know. I think as far as just kind of wanting to have that kind of, I guess I'm at a loss for words, so to speak.
No, I get where you're going. It's just again, time will tell what happens. The portal is it's something that everybody should go ahead and get warm to now because I think we're only going to see it get more loose in terms of like one-time free transfers. You
But
as long as there's a legitimate reason, you're good. You've got eligibility, so might as well get used to it. There's talent on the way, so you should be happy about that. Will there be bad things that happen from it? Yes, but the game of life is gaining more than you lose. So as long as they do that, which I think they certainly have already and will continue to do, then it's all good in my opinion.
I 100% agree. And just to kind of put a bow tie on my point there, I think more than anything, like, wanting to address the area of need, right? That I guess that was kind of the words I was trying to get out of my mouth a little bit was, addressing that area of need. And it's just because you and I have heard from the, Beaver's Edge subscribers, there are two position groups that I would say 98% of our board feel that's what Oregon State needs to address, and everything else, is gravy, right? So naturally, I think you and I and everyone else would like to see results from that. So, just to kind of wrap up that whole point, I'm very excited to see what they're going to do with the portal. I'm very excited to see, excited and anxious, to kind of see what the next moves are because these first two, very shrewd, skill positions. I like it. Now, if they could go get I think about a couple years ago when they were able to, snag Charles Moore. Obviously, it didn't work out, coming over from Auburn as a defensive tackle, but that's the kind of guy that, I think the Beavers need to try to target, via the portal or what have you. But they've done it before. So I place my confidence in Jonathan Smith and his staff. So to kind of put the bow tie on this podcast and start to wrap up, we want to go ahead and give a quick update on the Oregon State men's and women's basketball teams. Unfortunately, both are on a COVID-19 pause right now due to contact tracing protocols and testing within the program. The women's team has been on pause for several weeks now. The men's team obviously goes on pause shortly after the loss to Stanford on Monday. So again, our thoughts and prayers are with everyone in the program, but at this point, a lot of uncertainty moving forward, especially on the women's side, as they've been down for a while. So we'll be able to update you guys at Beaver's Edge as soon as we have any more information. But right now, pretty much just they're both on pause due to contact tracing protocols. And on the men's basketball team, not to say that it was, in the reading the tea leaves, but, given that they missed, the entire assistant coaching staff missed this last weekend, and Roman Silva, center, missed it due to contact tracing protocols. Wayne Tinkle talked about how shorthanded they were. So, potentially there, could have been some more developments in that arena. So again, our thoughts are definitely out with both basketball programs as, everyone stays healthy and works to get back on the court. I know all of our edgers and everyone will be sending thoughts to Wayne Tinkle and Scott Rulick's squads. So that'll kind of wrap up this edition of the Edge podcast. Jared, anything else you want to wrap up with just before we sign off? And, I just got to say my kind of parting thoughts to edgers is stay glued. Be honest, stay at beaversedge.com, stay glued to the damn board. We'll be on it. And Jared and I, just like yesterday, you'll get, we just get surprise updates and boom, all of a sudden now there's a running back that's Oregon State coming right from South Carolina. So Beavers can really seem to, that's the great thing about the portal. All it takes is just one guy and your outlook changes, considerably. So I would just tell everyone, stay patient, and I would be willing to bet that there's going to be some good news still on the horizon.
That is pretty much all I was going to say. Stay tuned in. Like we said earlier, they're not done. So there's more good on the way. So keep it locked.
Perfect. Well, that'll go ahead and wrap up this edition of the Edge podcast. Big shout out to Jared Halus for joining me, as always, on this edition of the Edge podcast. Keep it locked to beaversedge.com. Jared and I will continue to have recruiting coverage all the way up until the late signing window. We're going to be glued to the transfer portal. We're going to have analysis of guys coming and going. Also, would be remiss if we didn't mention this as well as, we had some departures happen from the program yesterday. You can read about that at beaversedge.com as well. So again, beaversedge.com. That's where you're going to want to keep it for everything Oregon State. For Jared Halus, this is Brenden Slaughter signing off on this edition of the Edge podcast.